welcome. I hope you've had a moment to get settled. Please do go ahead and either use your phone to scan the QR code that's on your screen or click the link that's in the chat to sign in. This will enable me to send you any updated materials that might come up, resources that we may discuss today, etc. So I'll give you a moment to do that. And Andrew, if you would not mind adding that a couple more times, as folks I see are still hopping on and may not have access to that previously loaded chat.
Absolutely. And just as a reminder, towards the end of the session, I will be dropping in the attendance tracker and a survey. And I know that Riza will also have a survey. Just wanted to say welcome to everybody and thank you, Riza, for being here again. Session 2. So we're excited to get moving. So yeah, Riza, go ahead, let you introduce yourself and we'll get rolling.
Great, thank you. So welcome to integrating health skills, practice opportunities, and culturally responsive practices into health education classrooms. This is a session that has a really ambitious agenda. And so it's really centered around the goals of health education are to maintain healthy behaviors, change those unhealthy ones, try to delay the onset of any risky behaviors. And to be able to meet these goals, right, we must be rooted in a skills-based approach rather than just content. And I'm going to go into those details in our session today. So this is interactive, which means I'm going to ask you to please turn on your webcams and add to the chat, unmute your mic, and really add to the conversation. If needed, and this is optional, you can connect to the closed captioning that brings up some subtitles. You just have to click the up arrow on the closed caption button that you see on your bar menu, and then just select show subtitle. This might help for those who are visual learners and also for screen fatigue. With that being said, I'm Raiza. My pronouns are she, hers, ellas, y en español. I am the lead professional learning facilitator at RMC Health. At RMC Health, we're an organization, a nonprofit actually outside of the Denver metro area, and we provide trainings and capacity building to professionals, champions like yourselves, on a variety of topics to build capacity and skills to support the students that you serve. I just want to give a little bit of background about myself. I facilitate trainings nationally to really build that health educator capacity to implement these skills-based health ed, along with building safe, inclusive classrooms. I also manage some implementation trainings for a program called Second Chance with our public health partner, and it's an alternative to suspension program for youth tobacco nicotine infractions. I offer project support. And I also lead our merge organization's diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, belonging, and accessibility efforts. Prior to this, my work was centered around, it was intersected between education, public health, and healthcare. So that's really in a nutshell, but it was all with around adolescent health and adolescent health outcomes. So I'm really happy to be in this space with you and to really uplift equity via skills-based health ed so that we can really uplift communities, right, to form equitable, safe, and inclusive spaces and meet those health goals. So these are the objectives for today. I'm going to have you just read them, what's on your screen. You might have already been familiar with them based on the conference session information. So we're going to identify some functional health information. This is what students need to know, right, to acquire those health enhancing behaviors and skills, to explain the importance of relevant and engaging practice, and to discuss best practices for those culturally responsive and inclusive approaches in the health ed classroom. Are there any questions to the objectives? Okay. This is how we're going to get the work done today. So the agenda really flows the way that our objectives does. Again, it is ambitious. We're going to go through a lot here, but I'm going to pace myself. so that we're able to still have some rich dialogue. I want to ensure that these sessions are interactive and engaging. So we're going to use some online tools. Here you have, I'll share in just a moment, the note catcher, the breakout rooms, the Padlet, peer deck we might get to. Of course, pen and paper is always optional. So in saying that, let me just, if you can just give me a moment. I want to make sure that you have this. This is a Google Doc that we're going to be using. Okay, hold on. And I'm adding this to the chat. I just want to make sure that you do have accessibility to it. So I don't, like, you have the permissions. And you do. So I'm going to add that's a little longer of a link. But this is a note catcher that will allow you to really follow the flow and take any notes that you would like, and just to think about today. Okay. So we're going to jump right into our group agreements. I encourage you to build this up with your students, so that they really feel like they've have a collective understanding of what your processes are and what your norms are. For our time together, please do ask questions and share ideas. You're experts in your experience, right? And that we learn from others when we share ideas and questions. Please take care of personal needs. I do have a brief movement break scheduled. So feel free to do what you need. You can stand up, etc. Like stretch, hydrate. You're welcome to do that. Please do delay distractions. I know it might be hard when we're tuning in from home. I will share with you, I have a couple dogs. One's chewing on a bone right underneath my desk. The other one's in the living room. You might hear them bark. It's okay if your animals or your children come in and out, etc. It's all good. And then we just want to hold a safe and inclusive learning environment. RMC Health incorporates a variety of strategies to do this. And please do use your webcam and audio, especially in small groups. It's hard sometimes if you're in a small group and you're not seeing, another person. And also we understand if you don't have that capability, but if you can just share that out with your persons, that would be great. All right, let's get right into our warm up. So I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. And what I'd like for you to do is you're going to introduce yourselves, your name, pronouns, what you like, schools that you're at, or your role. And then what I'm going to have you do is I am going to copy and paste these directions into the chat. And so I would like for you to reflect on a health skill that you're grateful that you learned and a health skill you wish you learned before leaving high school. So that is the conversation. In a moment, a pop-up window will appear that looks like this. And it's going to ask you to join. And so I would like you to do that. But the way you're going to capture your thoughts is actually by using this Padlet. So I'm adding this Padlet to the chat as well. So what you're going to do is you're going to access this first. Give me a thumbs up when you were able to do that. So in the breakout rooms, right, you're going to use a Padlet. Again, just click on the link. And you want to be able to go to the breakout section that the Padlet says. So if you are asked to go to breakout room 1, the section that says breakout room 1 is what you're going to work on. If you're in 2, right, and how it goes. And then after you submit, any ideas, you're welcome to, give some love, submit your responses, read everybody else's, but you'll be able to see what everybody does, even when you're in your breakout. So with that, I'm going to pause and go ahead and set you up to do this. And it's going to be very brief. All right. And you're welcome to join. See you in about 4 minutes. just very quick. We're just waiting for a few more folks to join us as you're closing out their room. And actually, let me take a look at the Padlet.
I apologize for our group. We couldn't access the Padlet once we were in our group.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can always just know at the bottom of your breakout, I think you can say leave room or like go back to main room, and you can come back to the main room and we can troubleshoot for anybody who might have any technical issues. But it's okay. We can discuss what's come up, right?
Yes.
Here's basically the reflection that you've had, and you're still able to share in the conversations that you had. So what's health skill that you wish you learned before leaving high school? Thinking back to that K-12 experience, right? I learned in high school, I didn't take high school health, but sex ed would have come in really handy. Yeah, how to be mindful, food planning and preparation, exercise, just being physically active. And then what are some things that you wish you learned before leaving high school? I wish lifelong fitness lessons would have taken root. Physical activity, nutrition. So just some pieces of content, right, that would have been helpful to incorporate into skills so that you're able to thrive. What do you notice about those submissions for the skills that we learned that we're grateful for and those that we wish we had learned? So what was your general conversation like?
Well, if I may, our group thought that being of an age group where we didn't have health in high school, that we really wish we would have. So as a health teacher, I have a little bit of envy for the information we're able to give to the kids, because I think, oh, that would have been good to know.
Yeah, Jenny, you bring up a salient point. I mean, I can recall my own experience, and I'm dating myself here, and I hope that means that we're all in good company. And so, high school was a lot of rote memorization, and I didn't see any of my intersectional identities represented, like things that might affect my cultural ethnic group, things that might be related to other identities. Relationships weren't acknowledged. Like it was just very heteronormative and traditional. And now we have like vapes today that we would have not even thought about then. I mean, I went to a high school that actually had a smoking section. So that means that I look a lot younger than I am, because we have laws around that now that wouldn't even be, a thing. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for allowing me to share that snippet, because that's really informed, the work that I've done, probably that it has informed your professional practice. So let's review what skills-based health ed is. So what we want to be able to do is that our health content will not change unhealthy behaviors or maintain healthy behaviors, but teaching students health skills will. And it prepares those students to lead healthy and thriving lives. So we want to focus on the shift is what can students do versus what students know. Okay. And so the reason we focus on the development of skills is because the goals of health education are these things right here: to maintain positive health behaviors, to unchange those unhealthy ones, to delay the onset of use or experimentation with risk or unhealthy behaviors, and ultimately to develop health literacy. We really want to build the efficacy, the self-efficacy in students, right, to be able to thrive. And so when we think of the purpose of health ed in these terms, right, it makes sense that teaching only concepts. So for instance, having students memorize parts of the body doesn't help us reach these goals, or to know the reasons why, you know, wearing a seatbelt would protect, right, like my clavicle, my butt, like, right, like it doesn't show us how to use a seatbelt. It just tells me like, okay, I got to care for my body, but in what ways? So really, you know, the skills that we're going to be learning today or just touching upon today is really about, does it lead to behavior change? So here are the content areas that usually are covered in health ed classrooms. And so when we teach these, we must teach health skills with functional information. So what does that mean? You might have some mandates that tell you which of these content pieces you must cover. Also, you might have some data which is meaningful, right, to you and your community at your school that says, oh, I really need to focus more on promotion of mental, social, emotional health, right? Like I'm really seeing, you know, these things change, etc. But the point here is that you want functional health information that is usable, applicable, and relevant. Those are the three things. Like, write this down. Is it usable? Is it applicable? And does it relate? So you have to carefully select what you're going to provide to students. I've sat here and presented this tidbit, and there's some folks who are like, this is such a relief. I don't have to use all that content. Other folks are like, oh, I have a lot of content. What do I take out? So let's kind of talk a little bit about that. There's sort of a two-pronged approach that I would say is recognized in the field. So there's content-based units that incorporate skills through a planned skill progression, which is, you say, here's the skill that we're going to use, right? And here's why it's important. Then you model what that skill is. You allow for students to have those practice opportunities, and then the students have a chance to demonstrate proficiency. And so then there's skills-based units where you're looking at the skills and you're going, oh, I think I can pair this with this content area. And then you would follow the same progression model of introduction, modeling, practicing, and then assessment. So what skills am I referencing? This is what I'm referencing. It's a national health education standards. They were written to not just develop knowledge, but those skills, they're outlined in 2 to 8 that you see here. And this is based on research where they collected enough information that will outline that these skills are needed to, one, thrive and reach the goals of health education and develop health literacy. So when functional information is selected carefully, right, and paired with the health skill instruction, that functional information becomes knowledge. And I'll go into that in just a moment. Actually, I'm going to go back to this. What do you see here are the verbs for these skills? Does anybody want to unmute and say, hey, here's what I'm seeing the most? What's the action word?
Students will do these things.
Yeah. So they're being tasked to demonstrate, right? That's action. How do we have students demonstrate, right, that they're using decision-making skills? How do we have students demonstrate that they're going to use goal setting, right? So like we want them to show us that they're doing that. So when we think about that, when we're planning, right, we just want to be careful with proportions. We want to be able to spend I would say twice as much time developing skills as you're teaching concepts. A lot of health educators struggle with developing skills, which is why sometimes their instruction tends to teach more concepts. But again, when you're spending more time on skills and those practice opportunities, right, you're talking about long-term, right, usable relevancy in application. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little practice here. So I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. I think we'll try 3 breakout rooms. And what you're going to do is you're going to access the link that I'm adding into the chat. Actually, how about I'm not going to do this? Here's what I'm going to do first. I'm going to change this up here. Okay. Whichever grade band you teach, feel free to access those links. And I'm just going to randomly, well, I'm going to pick high school for now. So what I'm asking you to do is I'm going to set up some breakout rooms that you are going to choose from. And give me just a moment to rename this. So I'm just doing them by grade bands. It's possible you may not have somebody in there with you because they may not be in your grade band. That is okay. You can do this as an independent activity. And the gist is for you to think about the prompt that's there. And so what you're seeing on your screen is what I have for high school, resist vaping. And so what I'd like for you to do is to keep in mind what might you teach? What kind of information might you provide around resisting vaping? And then what skills would you incorporate? And again, I just want to state that the skills are these that you see on the screen, right? So what could you add to resist vaping? Maybe an obvious one might be decision making, right? Like refusal skills. So that's the gist of what we're doing here. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, you can be in your rooms and okay, hold on. You are able to select whichever one you'd like to go to. Again, you might have some people there, you may not. So you're just going to click join. Okay, so how did everybody do? What did you see yourself doing first? So I'm just going to share my screen really. I'm going to do a different share here so we can see like a T chart. This is what I'm pulling up for high school. But did you start with skills or did you start with functional health information? Kind of curious where folks landed. Were there any observations about the functional health information that your group identified? You can add it to the chat or you can unmute. It may be easier to unmute though.
I'm not sure exactly where it falls, but I was with Jordana and she's a school nurse, and then a first grade teacher, and then myself and Christina are art teachers. So we kind of started talking about ways that we can incorporate body positivity in art, but we kind of got cut off.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry that you didn't have a lot of time to really dissect that. But yeah, so you were already thinking of like, what do students need to know, right, about this? And then what skills might you pair that with? So if you're looking at, for instance, these skills and you're thinking about body positivity, let me do that share again. What skills might you be able to pair with that? Body positivity. What do you think we might want kiddos to begin to think about?
So we talked about analyzing the influences because social media and advertisements are constantly bombarding these kiddos with inappropriate or not really what is the norm, and changing what they think is the norm.
Okay. So that's also sounds like it might actually have a co-occurring skill, right? Which is also access valid and reliable resources. Because it's not just analyzing it, but where are they getting their information from? Right.
Yeah.
And then how, and then being able to analyze what does this mean to me and in my community. So it's a perfect example that you all did there. So what we're going to do really briefly is just take a quick 2-minute break, and you're welcome to turn off your cam and just take the quick 2 minutes. Others might stay on and do this yoga with me. Just a quick movement here, about 30 seconds. Please feel free to modify any of these moves for your personal ability or reference. So you can sit at the end of your chair, put your hands back if you're able, and just do a nice stretch. You might want to try to arch your back a little bit and hold. My back is cracking. I hope you can't hear it. And then come back to neutral position. If you're able to stand, you can also do this just sitting down. I use my chair. My foot is on your calf. If you're able, I hold on to my chair. You can just lift and stretch to the side. Oh, this feels so good. And then on the other side, you don't really realize like the screen fatigue, right? Like in just how you're sitting and you get up and you're all achy. The third pose here is a seated twist. So if you're able, just quick twist there. And then on the other side. And if you're able to get up and just lean forward, nice bend to your knees and stretch that out. All right, adding movement to your instruction is a good way to also realign and reassess. Where your students are at. It really promotes learning that way. It activates a different part of our brain. Okay, so let's go right into practice opportunities and skills-based health ed. So I'm going to go with the example, Jordana, that you used, right? Like you all talked about body positivity, right? And you mentioned analyze influences, perhaps access valid and reliable resources. You might even use interpersonal communication, right? So that you're able to really, like what you're hearing and seeing, right? You're able to then build some techniques around. So what I want you to do is I want you to think of a health skill that you feel most confident using in your own life. And I want to know, how did you get good at this skill? And so share out your answers. I know that this says at the tables, but share it out in the chat without using the word practice. How did you get good at a skill? Think of any skill that you feel the most confident in your life about.
Did you want us to unmute to do this?
You can unmute or you can add it to the chat.
Oh, to the chat.
But go ahead, Jenny. You got it.
As a new health teacher, I'm gaining confidence in planning more healthy meals.
Planning, what was that?
Planning more healthy meals. My healthy meal planning practice is improving.
Great. Great. So it's your mention of this is when we're thinking, how did you get good at this skill? It sounds like developing skill takes intentional, right? Time, right? Or intentional developing a habit or routine over time, that it's repetitive, right? Repetition or multiple attempts. And most people need multiple attempts or opportunities to practice. And how did you know that you, I see, Brenda, you said researching health-related activities. What kind of feedback did you receive to know that you're good at that skill? If you don't mind the answering.
I'm sorry, was the question for me? I'm sorry.
Yes, you identified researching health-related activities and that as like something you're really good at. So did you receive any feedback that like affirms that you're really good at that?
Yeah, I have a friend who likes to hang around and follow whatever I'm implementing from what I researched. So,
Yeah. And so
okay.
feedback is helpful, right? So hearing, it's pivotal actually. So if you're hearing that from a colleague, right, a mentor, coach, ourselves, right, when we try something, if it doesn't work, we try again. And you also need to have some safety to make mistakes and try again. So Jenny, when you're not preparing, right, like that meal, you're going, okay, I got to get back on this tomorrow, right? Like you're just going to try again.
Right.
And so this is what a health skill progression model looks like. And this is how we should approach our instruction. I would also argue that the skill progression is similar to any skill across content areas. So first there's the introduction. This is when you provide that functional knowledge that students need. Okay, so like, here's what you need to know. It also means that here are the steps you're going to take, right, for this skill. You're going to model those steps, and then a brief opportunity for the students to engage. Okay, we are all doing this as a group, right? This concept of skills-based, we're all in the introductory phase in this session. But more importantly is the reinforcement or practice stage. You want to be able to give at least a few opportunities for students to practice that skill so that they can connect it to themselves, right? The relevancy, if it's usable and if it's applicable. And then we want to give them an opportunity to show proficiency or mastery, right? That they're given a relevant and engaging task to complete on their own, and again, to demonstrate their ability in the health skill. And so what we're doing together right now is reinforcement. Okay, so I'm allowing those practice opportunities to take place. So here's what we're going to do. Here are some criteria that we want to take into consideration when we're considering those practice purposes, right? It needs to be aligned to the skill, right? So there needs to be alignment there. And it's okay if you present it later in more depth or depth of knowledge, right? You want to be able, again, to make that connection. And you want to simulate real world, right? Help students transfer this learning outside of the classroom, because that's the ultimate goal. It needs to be relevant to their lives. And engagement is important. When we're planning practice opportunities, we want to make sure all students participate in practice, not just a few. And sometimes it's a little tricky when you have the younger ages, right? Because you might need more guidance there. But just like we would scaffold and spiral instruction for content, we want to do the same for our engagement activities. And then you want to use lots of strategies and modes, right? So like you might want to use movement, you might want to use cooperative learning, right? Like think, pair, share. So just whatever you can incorporate that students can demonstrate that. And then really it should do its best to lead the student to the mastery of that skill and develop health literacy. So this is what we need to take into consideration when we are building our practice opportunities. So now you're going to have an opportunity yourself to use a tool here that's called the Padlet. And you're going to just go to the link that I'm going to put in the chat, but I'm going to give you the directions first. Once you get there, it's going to ask you like how you're feeling today. You can skip, and you can do that by advancing the arrows. And then you're just going to go through these activities. You're going to decide in your groups. I'm just going to do 2 groups. You're going to be a little bigger. You're just highlighting what is not effective. Okay, so our job is to become aware of this difference so we can be more intentional with our planning and instruction. Okay, this is the practice that you get to have. So I'm going to put you again into breakout rooms. But before I do that, as I usually do, let me add the directions and the link into the chat.
And while Rise is doing that, I just want to remind everybody to go ahead and refresh your conference hub on Canvas, because we've had a few changes to some of our sessions. So make sure you refresh that.
Okay. And give me a thumbs up if you were able to access the link. All right. And I'm just going to create 2 random rooms. And you can join now. It says no link. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this, a few of these as a whole group. So here are some activities that are health skills-based practice opportunity. Your job on this page is to let me know which one of these do you think is the not so effective one.
Should we just say what we think?
Yeah, just share what you think. It's practice.
Well, I'm thinking, before I realized it, I was thinking number 2 wasn't very, useful.
Yeah, and you're right. So, right, if you're singing a song about the components, what skill are you learning? Like, what are you putting into practice other than singing? Which is great, but yet it might be an engaging activity, but it's not a practice opportunity. Let's do a couple more here. What about here? If somebody spoke, I didn't hear, I'm sorry.
I think,
Which one do you think is not a skills-based practice? Is it number 4 or is it number 5?
that are not or are? That without skill-based practice opportunities.
Hold your hand up. Do you think it's 4 or do you think it's 5? So I'm seeing 4s. 4s, okay. It's actually 5. What are we doing? We love to play videos, but what skill are we using? Whereas if you're choosing your own adventure activity, right, you're thinking through those steps of decision making. So you're being able to identify those decision making and like, what is a pro, what is a con? If I do this, what will that lead? So it's a more active participation there. And let's just do this last one here. What do you think? Is it 6 or is it 7? That's not effective. That's correct. 6. Trivia is fun, but it's not a skill. It's really based on what? Knowledge, mostly knowledge, not skill. So this is just, again, an opportunity for you to be able to identify, right? Like, And we might be using this in our practice, right? That we might be really engaging, but they're not necessarily practice opportunities. Jennifer, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to hit that.
Oh, okay. No worries. All right. So what did you notice about those examples?
Sorry to interject, but Riza, we have 10 minutes.
Thank you.
They were very hands-on.
Very hands-on. Absolutely. And what about the number of student participants?
I think you were all would be active. All that were there would be actively.
Yeah. I mean, if you're playing trivia, who might answer? Usually just one, right? It's conferring and then one versus like say, oh, we're all participating in this and creating these scenes and scenarios. And so again, it's just reinforcing that practice opportunities, they should be engaging, but even though it's fun, it may not be a practice opportunity that builds skills. And that's really the question that you want to ask. So when you're doing your lesson planning and you're thinking about 1/3, 2/3, right? If you have an hour with students, let's just make this up. What is 2/3 of an hour? 40 minutes, roughly. Okay. So students should be taking up the space those 40 minutes. And those other 20 minutes or so, right, is what you have to present the information they need to know to be able to build that skill. Sometimes people feel really relieved about that. Some people go, oh, but that's a lot of practice opportunities that you can build. And it doesn't just have to happen in your health ed classroom. It can happen like in math. So let's just say like you're working on ways to cope with stress. Can you have your students, can you talk to your math teacher, let's just say, if you're in a classroom that has subject areas, or before you present a math test, if you're teaching, right, all subjects, can you have them practice a breathing exercise to reduce their anxiety before test taking? Yes. So now they've connected a skill about self-management, right? During math. So they'll start making these connections because you want them to transfer their learning outside of, right, like just a classroom setting. So how do we build these practice opportunities in ways that are culturally responsive to the students that you have? So this is really just a couple of lists that I'm going to share with you briefly. You really want to reflect on your students' strengths and whether you've considered them as strengths before. Okay. And are they shared across groups of students? So you really want to get to know like your talents, your skills, maybe even their responsibilities outside of school, because that can serve as like scenario prompts, right? Like scenarios or sentence stems, like, oh, I know that kids are doing this. I know a lot of my kids play sports, so I might use this analogy. So interest can help guide that instruction, right? And it keeps students engaged. It also funds their knowledge. So it adds to their own background, right? They get to tap into their own experiences and skills that are needed to navigate their day. It might also prompt their culture and cultural values, right? And understanding their identities to build a positive classroom culture and create those relevant learning opportunities. And then just being take note of language, right? Communication styles and patterns and norms, right? English language learners have bilingual skills that are often overlooked when they're evaluated only for their mastery of English. And, you know, there are BIPOC communities, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color, who regularly switch between dialects, and that's known as code switching, right? And it does require like higher levels of linguistic, social, cultural, and cognitive ability, but it often goes unnoticed. So, you know, just helping to recognize that. Being supportive in the classroom environment with representation and inclusive curriculum. So you want to be able to say, start building those authentic relationships. You want to be able to trust and build, right? Welcoming language, using anti-oppressive language. So actually, if you want to say anybody that has an A in their name, right, answer question 1. Anybody that has an I in their name, answer question 2, right? So like you want to be able to identify groups differently than the binary. And they get those regular messages of affirmation. And so here you really want to be able to raise expectations. Okay. So you want rigor, and you want, them to feel challenged and to learn, practice, and apply those new skills. And identify the skills that students need to complete higher level work, right? I mean, challenge them in different ways to master those skills. And don't be afraid to access technology, materials, or other needs that they're using. They live with these things tied to them, right? Like they can do a Flipgrid video on their phone, right? And do a PSA, and right. And they can also do refusal skills, right? And demonstrate. So get creative. There's also something called like Powtoons. So some folks are more visual, like artsy, right? They can draw like a cartoon, right? Like graphic novel, if you will, right, on decision making. So there's lots of ways to captivate their attention. And you want to be able for yourself to continue with your own learning, right? You want to overcome any internal barriers that you might notice come up for you. You might want to find, colleagues. Imitation is the best form of flattery, they say, right? So if you see that somebody does something well and it works for them, ask them, right? Can I watch you do this? Can I practice with you? Join that discussion and really work, again, to just overcome what those barriers might be. I just wanted to add a quick note that you might also need to note what might be some local or state mandates of the health content that you need to teach. And I think it's just important to take note that some laws and policies might actually undermine cultural responsive approaches. And so that you will need to make those decisions, right, based on professional responsibility and liability. So like we're not always all free of that. So that's really the suggestions and strategies to incorporate for culturally responsive approaches in the classroom. I wanted to share with you all that there's a training coming up that I'm co-facilitating with one of our partners, Care and Guidance. You might have heard of them. This is going to happen on Mondays from 7 to 8:30 p.m. So this would be at 4, I think, your time, right, Pacific Standard Time. And here are the dates, and we're going to do a deep dive into these skills. You can use your phone to scan and pull up like what that training looks like, or more information is on the registration form, I guess is what I'm saying. The last thing I want to mention is it's not a plug for sales, but I do want you to know that there are health skill guides that could be useful to you, and they go into deeper learning around how to incorporate these skills into activities where you don't have to think about and come up with them by yourself. They're already done for you. There's posters, there's cue cards here. So, okay, I can share the flyer with Andrew, and he can share that out. So I'm happy to do that. So in our closing, I just want to point out our objectives, that this is what I set out to do. And now I'm going to ask you to please take a quick survey, the same way that you signed in, on your experience of this session. So I'll give you a moment to try to get that QR code. And if it didn't work, here is the link in the chat. You're welcome to open up a tab. You don't have to finish it right now. You can just finish it later if you'd like.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Riza, thanks for doing 2 sessions today. and I know that you've had a packed schedule, so we really appreciate them coming in and giving us some information. Please stay tuned in this room. We have Get Digital with Health and Wellness with EverFi, which starts at 11:25. So just wanted to throw that in there. Riza, sorry, I thought you were wrapped up there, but go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm good. I just thank you everybody for, having me, provide this session. It was really fun. I hope it was fun for you all.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. And we'll see you all in the next session. Or